So I'm going to share a little bit about my background and share a little bit about our Anishinaabe culture and also how we applied our culture to work with others and overturn the government to protect our water. And hopefully I'll also have time for questions. I'm going to start out with a little bit about my background. This slide has 5 generations on my father's side. This picture here of my great-great-grandparents. This picture was taken in 1900, and they lived the traditional lifestyle, off the grid, fishing, hunting. This woman here was my grandfather's mother, and this woman here is his grandmother, and he was raised by his grandmother, and so my grandfather told me lots of stories about her and the lifestyle that they lived, the birch bark baskets that she made. And one of my favorite stories is about them going to harvest wild rice. And when they would arrive there, they would disturb the birds that were there, and there were so many that when they took flight, they would blacken the sky. So my grandfather was raised by his grandmother up until 1919, when there was a Spanish flu pandemic all across the world. People died of this flu. And our community suffered greatly. A third of our community died at that time. It immensely changed the life of my grandfather. At that time, he was sent to residential school up in Shingwalk in Sault Ste. Marie. And he wasn't there for very long, and he was abused there, and he decided to escape with another boy. After roll call in the morning and a couple of extra pieces of bread in their pockets, they escaped. And they made it to the railroad, and they went east, and they walked 250 kilometers. They finally stopped and felt that they were safe and wouldn't be dragged back by the police. My grandfather met my lovely grandmother, Lottie Dumont, and they had 5 children. My grandfather then enlisted in World War II, was gone for many years. My dear grandmother raised the family by herself during that time, and there's my father there with my mother, and I'm the oldest of 3 children. So as an adult, I met my husband there, and a Métis man. Both of us were interested in learning about our history and our culture. We grew up not knowing anything. We didn't speak the language. We didn't participate in the ceremonies or anything, and so we were very hungry for that. And that hunger really became apparent after our sons were born. And so as a family, we worked together and learned about our history and our culture. Today I work for Parks Canada as the Aboriginal Affairs Manager in the Northern Prairies Field Unit. I've since moved to Saskatchewan since Dump Site 41. So in this journey of learning about our history and culture, one of the most powerful things that I've learned was about our role as women. This is a picture of Elder Gloria King. She was one of the elders involved, grandmothers involved in our site, and she helped us do our ceremonies. She's from our community. She is the go-to person for ceremonies, for our water ceremonies, and she helps us to learn about taking care of the water. I've watched her in ceremony for years. I helped her, and then I became partaking in a role of those ceremonies. Our grandmother, Josephine Mandamin, not only did this woman do water ceremonies, but she stepped it up a notch, and she decided to bring awareness to the Great Lakes by walking around each and every one of them. She began the walk in 2003 and finished in 2006. One year she did 2. The teaching about women in the water is that women are responsible for the water. Women are life givers. Water is life. And we have a special connection with Grandmother Moon. We share a cycle with Grandmother Moon. As life givers, that child is surrounded by water for 9 months. And we know as life givers that in order for us to fulfill our role as life givers, that water has to be healthy. Otherwise, we won't have healthy children. And so that responsibility has been given to us as Anishinaabe Kwe to take care of the water. So we come from this beautiful island called, the elders call it Chimnamainamasing, Big Sturgeon Island. It's also called Christian Island or Beausoleil First Nation. I was fortunate enough in my position at Georgian Bay Islands National Park. It was park surrounded by water that I got to do water ceremonies and share that with the visitors at the park. And it's a very empowering thing to do, not only talk about it, but also help doing our ceremonies, and then also to live it, apply it, and practice it. So here we are, May the 4th, 2009. I got an email from Beth, and she told me about this water walk. And I said, oh, well, I'm just not sure if I can come. It's really last minute. I have to work. And then she sent me another nudge and said, put your money where your mouth is. And so I said, all right, I'll be there. I'll arrange to come off work because the water walk started at 3. And off I came. We started at Elmvale. We went to the artesian well where the water flows. And our elder, Gloria King, did the water ceremony there. And we took that copper vessel and we carried some water from that well out to the proposed dump site, about 5 kilometers. Each of us took a turn carrying it. We got to meet lots of great people along the way. There's a lovely image of the Parnell's farm. Lots of people. We all gathered at the proposed dump site at that time, and that was the first time I had met Steve Ogden, and he spoke about the historical overview of Site 41. And Maud Barlow was there, and of course you know who Maud is, and she talked about the international movement of Indigenous women stopping powerful corporations, and she gave the example of the women in India. So it was at that point that I learned that this was not an issue of garbage, it was an issue of water. And even though I had seen those Stop Dump Site 41 signs as I was driving by, because I'd lived in the area for decades, I never understood what the issues were, and I actually thought, because of the amount of signs and all of the energy that had gone into to oppose and resist the dump, I actually thought that it was well in hand, until that moment when I heard those speakers. This is a medicine wheel construct. This is a wheel of change, and this wheel represents the 4 directions. This is the east, this is the south, this is the west, and this is the north. And as holistic thinkers, which mostly Indigenous people are, we gather information from the east and we process it by going through this wheel. So we start out with the awareness. What happened? Well, I saw that there was a tie on this boat to get this dump in, and that one person broke the tie, and that made the difference for the dump being able to be passed and go through. So I was like, wow, one person can make a difference. I learned about the aquifer, the Alliston Aquifer underneath the dump, and I also learned about the fight for water, to protect water in India. Related. So how did I feel? I felt really empowered and I felt really encouraged by what I heard. And what did I think? I thought, we could do it too. So in the Western Norway, what did I learn? I learned that Indigenous women working together were able to overturn corporate giants by protesting in their own communities. What will I do now? As a result of what I learned, I thought I'm going to protest. So I moved into the northern doorway, and that's the action and the connecting. And so at that point, I connected with Beth, and we talked about setting up a camp. That was our action. We had gone right around this circle. And it's important to know that a lot of people were aware of this site, but didn't, as Steve said, they didn't stand up. And that's what he wanted them to do, is just stand up, be able to move a little bit around that wheel. And then today, you're going away with information. Maybe you're thinking about how it makes you feel, how it makes you think. Maybe you'll think about what you learned, think about how your behavior will change, and then think about what that's going to look like. That would be great. That's the wheel of change, and that's what Steve had said. Maybe some of you will be doing similar thinking, similar actions sometime in the future. So that This was at the beginning of May, and so then we set about setting up our camp, and the first thing was lighting that sacred fire. And the men take care of the fire. In our culture, the women are responsible for the water, and the men are responsible for the fire. Now, I haven't received the teachings about being a firekeeper. I've observed the firekeepers, and what I have observed is that they have a ceremony for starting that fire. They take very good care of that fire. They make sure it never goes out. They make sure they have good wood for that fire. They treat that fire as though it were an old man, like a grandfather. And they also make sure that people are safe around that fire. So we had our sacred fire in place, and that first Friday night that we set up our camp, we had our first full moon, our ceremony, our first of 4 moon ceremonies at the site. We had originally planned to be there for the weekend, but that Sunday morning, Johnny said to us, we all gathered in a circle around that fire, and Johnny said, our firekeeper, he said, that fire has told me that we've got to keep it lit until we stop this. So we went into high gear. So we started to make the camp our home. We had lovely visits right off the bat from folks like Anne, who brought us homemade mittens and hats to help keep us warm because it was very frosty and cold. Steve brought us firewood as well as other local farmers for our sacred fire. We were on site, and grandparents and elders that we had never met came up to us, and they hugged us and they thanked us, and some of them were crying. And we were really awestruck by this. We didn't really understand the impact that we were making at that point in time. At the entrance of our camp, we posted a First Nations water declaration. The water declaration affirms women's role in water, taking care of the water, and it also affirms our treaty right, our right to exercise over the care and control of water and creation. So here's our camp. It rained every weekend, May, June, July, August in 2009. I chose this picture because of the dump truck there loading, bringing some wood for us for our sacred fire. We made the site a drug and alcohol-free site, no weapons. We wanted this site to be safe for families to come, and we also set up a Facebook group. And we sent out messages, we asked for donations, we asked for support and help. We'd let them know when the events were coming up. And we had over 1,400 members last I counted. I was the administrator on that. We continued to have circles in camp. It was very difficult. It was a very fluid group of people. Sometimes there would be like 6 of us or just a handful of us, and there would be hundreds of us. And it was just very fluid. And there was lots of people giving direction, and it was really difficult. If you know anything about the stages of what a group dynamics, what groups go through, storming, forming, norming, and performing, and ending, like we were constantly in that mode because our group changed all the time. We started a letter campaign, and we provided various samples of letters from various perspectives so that everyone could feel like they would have a heart connection to a letter that they could sign. We had them sign them in triplicate to the Prime Minister, the Premier, and the Minister of the Environment. One day, Lita and I sat down by the well and got signatures from everybody that was there. And then one day we made a mass drop-off at the post office, had over 500 letters. And the woman at the post office said, "You go, girl." This is a map of Tiny Township, which is really important. That this is the location of the site. Every morning and every night, Steve Ogden came to our camp and he gave us updates, and he shared that historical information and was there anything that we needed. And one of the things that he did is he took me to the area where the water from the surface of the site was very close to McDonald Creek, which was close to the river, which was close to another river, which flowed into Georgian Bay, and all of this could happen within 24 hours. So I realized what we were doing was much more than protecting the water and the aquifer. We were also protecting the waters of Georgian Bay. And I'd like to just point out, this is a tip of Christian Island, which is our First Nation community, and I appreciate that it's on the map, and some maps don't even show us that we're even there. So I just wanted to say that. So there was just so many things that Steve shared with us that, like, what's wrong with this picture? And you just have list after list, and it just really inspired us to continue to do our work. We had potlucks, which was talked about. We gathered. We had this amazing guy who donated his sound equipment every Saturday night. We had lots of great homemade pies. And every day we were across the road looking through this fence at what they were doing to the land there and preparing it for the garbage to be brought up. And you know, there was rumors about water or garbage coming from Toronto. You may or may not know, they truck it, I believe they truck it to Michigan. And so this was only an hour and a half from Toronto. So day after day we watched this, and it was very disturbing. We wanted to do more. We felt that we needed to up our resistance. Up until this point, we had been very compliant and sweet and accommodating. Come on to our site and join us for a meal and all of that. And we had a circle this one night, and we went around, and Beth said very clearly, time to block the gates. And at that point in time, it totally changed our camp. We were now in high gear. We were now, sometimes we were quite sparse in camp, and now even more sparse. Each of the 3 to 4 gates, had to be personed. We didn't want anybody to be alone, so that was at least 2 people, 8 people around the clock. We had people who mobilized and created email trees for support. Once the gates were blocked, whenever we felt that there might be a threat of arrest or something, we would try to get more people out. And there was no pressure for people to block the gate. It was more come for support. It's totally your choice of whether you want to sit at the gate and block it, or what was just as important was to be there supporting and even standing across the road and bearing witness to what was happening. And even though I didn't personally sit at the gate for hours and hours and hours like many other people did, I really felt my role was in camp, at that fire, continuing to offer our sacred tobacco to that fire and helping with the ceremonies and doing that work. That was okay, because we all had different roles to play there. We, at this time, our resources were more stretched. We were getting debriefed on what it meant to be arrested, what our rights were, what we could and could not do, what was expected of us. We lived in fear. We had lawyers' phone numbers written on our bodies because they told us that they'd take our cell phones if we were arrested. And we just lived very differently. I've never been in that kind of a situation other than when I was in other circumstances where I was not safe. But that was like just incredible, the fear and the stress that added. Arrests could happen anywhere. They weren't just happening at the site. So we were, like that raid that one night with the helicopter. Half the camp was out at Bosa Lake First Nation doing the presentation to the community there that night, I believe, that raid. So we lived in fear. But we had people come, they continued to come, and there were women who came just in the morning to help us get the kitchen organized and food. This was part of the fear. We were under constant surveillance. It was just unreal. It's hard to believe that, you think you live in this free country and you were constantly monitored through audio and cameras. Every day that would go by, I don't know how many times. And it just seemed whenever I went out to a gate to see if they had enough water or bring some food or something, that'd be exactly the time when they would go by. The helicopters above, chasing people into the cornfield. Very difficult to live day after day. I worked full time and I was on the site on the weekends and after work, but nonetheless it was very strange, and probably even more so for the people who lived there 24/7. But we carried on. We had the July rally. We had thousands of people out there. I believe there was over 5,000 people. And the police were out there taking pictures of people's license plates while we were all gathered there. It was great. We really needed that support because, as I say, people were getting arrested. It was challenging our morale. The firekeepers continued to take care of that fire. They also happened to be singers at this big drum. I'm happy to tell you that both of my sons and my husband were part of part of those men who took care of that fire. That they were here supporting me and the other women to take care of the water. I like this picture because Beth and I are holding this wampum belt, and this wampum belt speaks to the First Nations relationship with the newcomers. And you may not be able to see on what. There's two people, I believe they're hand in hand, and what that talks about, it's a document that tells what our relationship will be like. And they are walking hand in hand, and they're on a parallel path. Our paths will not cross one another. We will not overcome one another. We will walk in parallel and unimpeded and unhindered on our paths. That's what that wampum talks about. So it talks about our role to be here and to ensure that we can continue our path and not be forced onto that other path. Well, finally, at the end of the summer, the county councillors have been pushed to have a 1-year moratorium on the site, and it worked. We had 86%, I believe, in favor. And so, of course, we celebrated with another potluck and speeches and good times, and we met some amazing people. We were able to express our joy, our relief, our celebration, and our gratitude. In November that year, our group was nominated for the Peace Medallion for making a difference, and we hardly had any resources. We did it in a peaceful way, and I'd like to share this quote. "The woman is the foundation on which nations are built. She is the heart of her nation. If that heart is weak, the people are weak. If her heart is strong and her mind is clear, then the nation is strong and knows its purpose. The woman is the center of everything." So I shared with you of our journey of Site 41, and I shared with how the first women's, through applying our culture and our teachings and our ancient connection to the earth, that we were able to stand up for 161 days and overturn the decision to make that beautiful land into a landfill. We did this through our ceremonies, through the guidance of our elders and our grandmothers, our grandfathers, the sacred fire, talking circles, the moon ceremonies, the water ceremonies, and the fire keepers. We were taking care of that fire, we were taking care of that water, and we realized that to do this, for us to be successful in all of our endeavors and all of our paths, that we need each other. And that was definitely demonstrated at the site. We all work together and support each other regardless of what our personal interests were. So where do we go from here? Zero waste. I would like to say thank you to my family, to my community, Maud, to Steve, and to our Site 41 family, Council of Canadians, of course. I also would like to dedicate this to two of our fire keepers who have since passed away. Chinguach.